So what I'm hoping to do in this short video is give you some ideas about how you could take your clay studio practice home with you and set up a home studio. In doing so, I want to talk about different locations that you might use, different work surfaces, areas that might be good for wedging, and we'll also talk about some tools that you can find or make at home using some common household items. One obvious workplace might be your dining room table. Especially during this time of social distancing, it might be kind of nice to be in the center of things. In my own household, this isn't really a good option. It is kind of a busy area, which is kind of nice because I can see other people. But as you can see, this table gets used for puzzles, games. Occasionally we even eat a meal at it. So although it is a nice horizontal surface that's flat and smooth, not going to be a good surface for me. Another space you might consider is your kitchen. It is possible that this butcher block table would make a good clay surface. It's finished but not totally sealed, so it actually would release the clay nicely, and I could probably wedge on this surface as well without it moving around too much. The only problem here is if you use this space for food preparation, it might not be a great spot for clay. Probably don't want those two mixing. In this case, this one's long enough that I could maybe use this half for clay and that half for food. So this could potentially work. The other good thing about a kitchen is it can be a great spot to find and harvest some tools from, and we'll do that a little bit later on. Another good home studio option could be the unexpected. So we recently had a tree taken down and there's a big chunk of stump here. That's a relatively flat, clean surface. And this actually is sturdy enough, this would make a good wedging surface or work surface. So I'm going to wedge some clay right here. I have cut apart a broken earbud to use as my cutoff wire. Any piece of string tied around any two sticks or paper clips or clothespins rather actually would be even better. But this is what I've got. Let's see how it works. A little bit stretchy, a little bit thick, but did the job. And then, let's see how this does as a wedging surface. So when you're wedging, again, you want to push the clay forward and then rock it back. So I'll do this in slow motion. So I'm starting here, pushing down and forward, rocking it back a little further than where I started and pushing again. And then you can build up a rhythm. What you're trying to do when you're wedging is align those clay particles and remove any air bubbles that may be in the clay. A lot of the hand building techniques that you're going to be doing from home won't require you to wedge. Those are my favorites. But if you do need to wedge, find a suitable surface. You probably don't have one of these, but this is a good surface for it. The cutting board surface also would have been good, and I'll show you a few others as well. All right, this clay is ready to go. This may be my favorite clay studio yet. This is just in the backyard. So this is an old table with wooden slats on it, like decking boards. So it won't be a great spot to roll slabs, for example, but plenty of space. I threw a drop cloth on one end just so I wouldn't pick up texture from the wood, although that might be kind of nice. And I found this old piece of like flagstone, or I don't exactly know what it is, some kind of stone, granite maybe, that I think might make a good wedging surface. I'm going to try it out right now. I also tried out this thin string on the clothespins, and that worked pretty well as a cutoff wire. Not quite as delicate as the wire versions, the braided wire versions, but it worked serviceably. So let's see how this works for wedging. Again, pushing forward gently, rocking the clay back, the clay should slowly walk towards you, and it may get wider as it does so. If that happens, you can put it on end. One way you can prevent that widening is by squeezing your hands in to the sides as you're doing this. The only thing that I can see already I'm not going to love about this table is its height. So I'm having to bend over a little bit more than I'd like to. Ideally, you want to have a slight bend when you're wedging, but for me it'd be about 8 or 10 inches higher. But the surface of this rock is working quite nicely. Now, if you don't happen to have a chunk of stone laying around your house, nor one of those big round tree stumps, you can also do this just on concrete. So I'm just going to do this right on the ground here. You want to have it be a clean area of the concrete. Wouldn't hurt to sponge it and let it dry first, but you can wedge right here as well. Basement floors are great for this, as are sidewalks, driveways, any of the rest. Okay, so this clay is ready to go. It's got an interesting texture. Might have picked up a little bit of grit from the surfaces I was working on, but that won't hurt our finished product at all. All right, as far as work surfaces go, wood is probably going to be your best bet. If you can find some pieces of plywood, maybe an old cutting board that you're not using anymore, those are going to be great surfaces for rolling slabs, but also just working in general. The clay will stick, but the wood will absorb some of that moisture and will release the clay. Another good option could be a sheet of scrap drywall if you've got any of that laying around. One thing to keep in mind with that is you want to put duct tape around the edges so that you don't get plaster from the sheetrock into your clay. The silverware drawer can be a great spot to find some useful tools. Let's see what we can discover in here. Well, I think first off, finding a decent knife could be good if you don't have access to a fettling knife. This is an inexpensive knife that would work well for the task. In addition, this knife, the tip keeps bending, and so it's not really that great for cooking and cutting anymore. It doesn't matter if it's sharp or not really. Once we start cutting clay, which is essentially dirt, it's going to dull pretty fast. But it has some flexibility and is thin, which are the main things we're looking for. So I'm going to set this aside for a tool that I could potentially use. As I'm looking around in here too, I might try and find a serrated butter knife, one that's got these little teeth on it. Let me see if I can get this to zoom in there or focus on that. See those little teeth? Those will be nice as a shaping and smoothing tool. So we'll keep this aside as well. What else could we find in here? This could potentially be a useful tool. This is just a little kid's chopper, so you can do crinkle cuts. I don't know how useful it will be, but it could make a nice curly edge. We'll set that up there. I don't really know what this is doing in here. I've got a cheap Crayola brush that wound its way into our silver. Oh, I think we used this to paint some cookies one time. This would be a great brush for applying slip, so I'm going to keep that out too. Ooh, here I've got some grapefruit spoons. The serrations on these are a little bit bigger than on that knife, and this could be a good scraping or carving tool, so I'll keep this out as well. Let's see. Ooh, there's a few other things in here. Got some fancy silver. Probably don't want to use that, although the little end here could be interesting as a press mold or just as a textural element. But I'm not going to use the fancy silverware here too much for clay. It's possible maybe some of these wooden tools could be useful. I'm going to steer clear of those for now. Maybe as a wooden knife. I think this might be a cheese knife or something. Let's see what we can find in the next drawer. All right, lots of good options in here. This little spatula this could be, I don't really know what this thing is made for, maybe scraping pots, but it's soft enough that it could be used to smooth clay. So this could be a useful tool. It feels like it's got something a little stiffer in the interior that's keeping that from bending as much as the edges, but we'll keep that out. Ooh, got a little frosting knife. Not sharp, but this could be used for smoothing clay as well. Let's see. These could come in handy, maybe as a paddle, hitting the clay a little bit. And we've got a rolling pin. I think we've got another one too. That's I think a French rolling pin, but I'm gonna look for one that's got the straight bars for the straight rolling pin. This could be good. I'm not quite sure what this is. Oh, maybe making ice cream cones, but this could be a good spout maker, so we'll keep that out. By the way, these tools that I'm pulling out of the drawers here, I may or may not want to use them again for food. It kind of depends on what we do to them. All the metal tools will be fine. We can clean those off. And probably the wooden ones will be fine too, but don't take your favorite tools out of your kitchen. And you will not want to bounce back and forth between clay and food. Hopefully that's somewhat obvious. So I've got another rolling pin in here. By the way, secondhand stores can be good sources for these too, although I'm not sure if those are open during this COVID thing or not. This could be good just as a circle. Let's see if there's anything in this last drawer here. Aha! So this is all the silverware that doesn't match into the other silverware. So I'm going to look through this and see if I can't find some tools that I like a little bit less. Maybe this serrated knife in here. And this is a pretty nice fork. This could be good for a scoring tool, so I'll pull that out too. So, kind of the same idea here. We're just looking to find some things that may make some interesting textures or may replace some of the functions of the tools that we're used to. So I'm looking through a little craft shelf that my daughter has. Here's some clothing templates. I don't know if we'll find much use out of those, but perhaps. I'll keep that one in the memory, and just in case that comes in handy. Oh, here's some cool stencils she has. These could be used for painting underglaze or slip, or even embossing into the clay. Maybe I'll pull those aside. Got some letters and stickers, some Sharpies. Oop, here's another good slip brush. This could be useful. I'll pull that out. Mostly drawing supplies in here. Yeah, nothing super useful in there, but you never know. I think our kitchen haul was a little bit better at this point, but I did find a metal ruler with a cork back. That'll be handy as well. Although I would encourage most of you to find other places to work than your laundry room, it could be a good spot to find some useful tools. For example, if I poke around on these shelves here, there's a whole bunch of random stuff. But here's some string that I could turn into a cutoff wire. Let's take a little chunk of that. See this little window film scraper? This is for applying like transparent window coverings. This could be useful for smoothing clay. I've got some spray bottles here. You do want to make sure that these didn't have anything noxious in them. This one's window cleaner. I could dump that out and use that for a spray bottle. Here's a little putty knife. That could be useful for cleaning up. Got part of an old saw blade here. If you have some old saw blades, this could be a handy thing to use for a scoring tool. We'll just wrap a piece of tape around the back side here and this will be good to go. I've got some old pieces of wood. This could be used as a paddle. This would be good. And if you have some woodworking equipment or some like a belt sander or something like that, you can take a square chunk of wood and round it off to create this anvil shape. This is especially good for coil building, where we use a combination of the paddle and the anvil. This has a nylon stocking over it to keep it from sticking to the clay as it gets wet. Not too much else down here, but maybe I could grab one of these clothespins, break it in half, and tie the ends to my string for my cutoff wire. I've assembled all the tools that we found throughout the house and paired them with the clay tools that we're used to using. So we have our mud tool smoothing rib and the items that would work well for that, the cutoff wire and the one that we just found pieces for. The needle tool here, I'm suggesting we use an X-Acto knife. You'll be able to do some of the same things. This one's a little harder to replace, but if you have a really small nail or a needle for a sewing machine, maybe you can get creative with some super glue and fashion your own needle tool. Either of these brushes would work well to apply slip. I use an old bamboo brush for that. And then these are hard to replace as well, but the fine serrated ribs that I have here will work well with our grapefruit spoon or with that butter knife that we found with the teeth on it. The coarse serrated rib, again, is a little bit tricky to make a substitution for, but a wire-wrapped loop tool would work well for that. Or I happen to find this chunk of bandsaw blade that I had cut apart previously, and these teeth will approximate this quite well. As far as a scoring tool, a fork will work in most circumstances. If it's more delicate work than that, you could use the X-Acto knife. Same for the fettling knife, depending on what you're trying to do. In most cases, a paring knife will work just fine for that. I found an assortment of rolling pins, and this is the pony roller that I typically use for small hand building projects. We didn't find one of these, but you can usually make do with your hands or some combination of these two. But with everything that we did find, I think we're well on our way to getting our home studio up and running. A couple of other things to consider. You may also want to get yourself a container for water. Ice cream buckets work pretty well for that, or one of these small pint jars for slip as well. What you're going to do with this is you're just going to start out with some of your clay water as your slip, and then as you have scraps from making that get dried out, you're just going to sweep those into here and it will make a nice attaching slip for you. Let's see, you're going to want to store your clay, slip, and any projects that you've got going in a place that's not going to freeze. One location that I've got going is right here in this cooler, and this will actually help it retain moisture as well, so it's kind of good in two directions. So, regardless of where you choose to set up and what surface you choose to work on, hopefully you're all set to get your clay practice underway again. Remember, for surfaces, you could use canvas, you could use drywall. If you use the drywall, make sure that you wrap duct tape around the edges just so you don't get any crumbs in the clay. You could also take advantage of some of the packages you may have arriving at your doorstep and use your cardboard as a work surface too. I'd say this one's probably a little bit small for what we're trying to accomplish here, and you will have to contend with the texture of the corrugation on here too. But if you had a larger box, this would be an adequate work surface as well, and much easier to clean because when you're ready to get rid of it, you can just recycle it. All right, well, hopefully this gets you on your way to doing some making, and I'll put out some more videos of different project ideas that you could do as well. So when it comes to cleaning up, you're going to want to wash your hands in a bucket of water rather than running this down your sink. Even if you have a utility sink in your basement, this is a much better solution. I've got a little sponge in there, but this bucket is maybe only a quarter full, so I might have as little as 1 gallon of water in here, which will be more than sufficient to clean off your hands, especially if you've just been hand building. If you're using the wheel, you might want a little bit something more than this, but this is just fine. the end of the day or the end of the week, you might toss this water. You can just water some plants with it. The clay is not harmful to our environment, but it will clog your plumbing if there's enough of it going down.